Imagine you're walking through India, and you stumble upon these incredible, massive stone pillars. They're beautifully polished and covered in ancient writing, a message from a king. But for centuries, nobody had a clue who he was. Okay, let's get into this, because it's a fantastic historical mystery.
So, when historians in the 19th century started rediscovering these pillars and rock carvings, they were faced with a giant puzzle. The script? Totally unreadable at first. And the king who ordered them all? He was like a ghost, completely lost to time.
Well, after a brilliant guy named James Prinsep finally cracked the ancient Brahmi script back in 1837, he found this name, or, well, this title, Devanampiya Piyadasi. But that just made things even more confusing. I mean, was Piyadasi his actual name? Was he a king from India or maybe even Sri Lanka? For almost another 80 years, his real identity was still a total secret.
And then, finally, in 1915, an inscription unearthed at a place called Maski connected the title, Devanampiya, to a name that was famous in old Buddhist legends, Ashoka. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces clicked into place. The ghost had a name. This legendary emperor was real, and these stones were literally his voice, speaking to us across more than 2,000 years.
But here's the thing. The man who carved all these messages about peace and tolerance, he wasn't always a peaceful guy, not even close. To really understand these inscriptions, you first have to understand the absolutely brutal transformation that he went through.
You see, early on, Ashoka wasn't a philosopher king. He was a conqueror, pure and simple. He was following in the footsteps of his grandfather, and his main goal was to make the already huge Mauryan Empire even bigger. And his favorite tool for the job was brute military force.
The moment that changed everything came when he invaded Kalinga, a powerful, independent kingdom on India's east coast. Now, this wasn't just another battle. This was a war so massive and so bloody that it would literally change the course of history.
100,000. Just let that number sink in. That's the estimated number of people killed in the Kalinga War. And that doesn't even count the 150,000 more who were captured and deported, their lives just completely destroyed. The scale of the devastation was just mind-boggling. Now, what's so incredible about this whole thing is that we have Ashoka's reaction in his own words, carved right into stone for everyone to see. He talks about his deep sorrow and regret. He wasn't bragging about his victory, he was absolutely haunted by it. So this intense feeling of remorse led Ashoka to a complete 180. He converted to Buddhism and created this whole new policy for his empire that he called Dharma. For a conquering emperor, this was just revolutionary. He was basically trading in military power for moral responsibility. It meant building things like hospitals, planting trees, protecting animals, and making sure everyone was treated fairly. His goal wasn't conquest by the sword anymore. It was conquest by Dharma. So, if you're a ruler with a brand new, revolutionary philosophy, how do you communicate that to a massive, diverse empire? Well, Ashoka's answer was to kickstart an architectural revolution, making sure his message would literally last forever. Before Ashoka, big buildings in India were mostly made of wood and brick. Stuff that rots and crumbles over time. Ashoka started this massive shift using stone, specifically this incredible polished sandstone. This wasn't just about using a different material, it was a statement. He wanted to build a message that would stand the test of time, something permanent. And the process of making these pillars was just an insane feat of engineering. I mean, just imagine it. First, you have to cut a single piece of rock that weighs dozens of tons. Then you've got to somehow transport it for hundreds of miles with no modern trucks or cranes. And then you polish it to this mirror-like shine that still baffles experts today. Absolutely incredible.
All these structures were part of this big communication plan. The pillars were basically giant stone billboards set up in busy public places so everyone could read his new rules. He also built stupas, these dome-like structures, which became centers for religious practice, and viharas, or monasteries, to support the monks who would help spread his message of Dharma.
But here's where the story takes a really surprising turn. Ashoka's message wasn't just meant for people in India. One of the most amazing discoveries from his reign shows this deep, fascinating connection to a completely different part of the world, the Greek kingdoms way out west.
So take a look at this. This is one of Ashoka's edicts, but it was found way out west in what is now Kandahar, Afghanistan. Back then, this area was right on the border between Ashoka's empire and the Greek kingdoms that popped up after Alexander the Great came through. When this inscription was finally translated, historians were expecting maybe a simple little message for some traders or something. But what they found instead, it completely blew them away.
Yeah, that's right. The crucial part was that the Greek wasn't just basic or clumsy. It was sophisticated. It was philosophical. It used complex ideas that someone educated in Greek thought, like Plato, would totally understand. This was a bombshell. It meant there was a thriving, highly educated Greek community living inside Ashoka's empire, and he was speaking directly to them, in their own language.
And this connection didn't just happen out of the blue. It actually started a whole generation earlier, when Ashoka's grandfather, Chandragupta, made a treaty with one of Alexander's successors. That deal included a marriage alliance, which meant that for decades, there was this steady flow of ideas, art, and people between India and the Greek world.
And Ashoka knew exactly who he was talking to on the world stage. Get this. In one of his edicts, he explicitly names the most powerful Greek kings of his day: Antiochus II, Ptolemy II, Antigonus II, Magas of Cyrene, and Alexander II of Epirus. This wasn't some isolated emperor. This was an Indian ruler who was fully plugged into the geopolitics of the Mediterranean.
So, what does it all add up to? What's the lasting impact of this ruler who went from a ruthless warrior to a philosopher king? Well, his legacy is huge, both symbolically and politically.
You've definitely seen this image before. This is the lion capital from one of his pillars at Sarnath. These 4 lions roaring out the message of Dharma to the 4 corners of the world. They were chosen as the official emblem of modern India. A 2,300-year-old symbol of just and righteous rule is still at the very heart of the world's biggest democracy today. But maybe his biggest legacy was an idea. The idea that a ruler's right to rule doesn't come from military strength, but from taking care of their people. This model of Buddhist kingship, leading with compassion and a sense of duty, became the gold standard for countless rulers all across Asia for centuries after him.
Ashoka tried to etch his regret, his philosophy, and his vision for a better world into the very stone of his empire. And his story leaves us with a really powerful question to think about. In the long run, against time and human nature, can a leader's moral vision, their ideals, truly last forever?